Boom. There we go. All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We'll give everybody a minute or two, Ariel, to get logged in. And once we see those numbers kind of plateau, we can kick it off. I guess while we wait, I'd love to see if you guys want to drop in the chat where everybody is joining us from today. I think that's always fun to see where we kind of span across the country. I'm in San Diego. Ariel, where are you?
I'm in Naples, Florida. So
Awesome.
coast to coast.
Coast to coast. Yes, we are. Iowa, Newport Beach, Greenville, South Carolina. I had the great pleasure of going to Greenville, South Carolina last year, and I loved that visit. Absolute cutest little city. The Ozarks. Oh my gosh. We're all over the place, you guys. How fun. Alabama.
Looks like we've got another South Florida. Corey, love to know where you are.
So cool. Kansas City, Jersey. Well, cool, you guys. We kind of plateaued here, so I'll go ahead and get started for the sake of time. Thank you so much for joining us today. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. Yes, this session is recorded, so if you need to jump off, we will be sending this recording to everybody who's registered, as well as any resources that we cover today in a follow-up email, a little later on this week. But thank you guys for joining us today. For those of you who I have not met yet, my name is Kate Guillen, and I'm the founder of Simplicity Ops. And I am joined today by my friend and colleague, Ariel. And so today's conversation is really all about how to prepare your business for the next level of growth. I think it would be helpful first if I started my slideshow, huh, Ariel?
Yeah.
I got ahead of myself. Sorry, you guys. Boom. All right, you can see me now?
Looking good.
Okay. All right, so to give you some context, at Simplicity Ops, we spend a lot of time helping advisory firms build the foundational systems that allow them to grow with confidence and not at the expense of their existing clients. Okay, and so I want to talk about how we can leverage tools like automation to ensure consistency as we grow and really help take our business to the next level. And so I don't know what is going on here, you guys. I'm sorry. We're going to keep it in this. I don't know. My computer glitches for whatever reason when I put it into presentation mode. So just ignore me. We're going to keep it here. So all that being said, I am so grateful that Ariel has been so generous with her time today to join us. She is a true automations expert. And I would love, Ariel, for you to share a little bit about your background, how you got into this world of automation, and what excites you about the work that you do.
Yeah, awesome, Kate. Well, I appreciate it. Like the screen says, am the founder and CEO of Sphinx Automation. I actually took quite a winding journey to get to where I am today. I started as an art major in college. I worked in the mortgage industry as a loan officer for about 6 years. And while I was doing that, I decided just for fun to get my CFP certification and start my own RIA. So that was that was quite the journey. But during the time that I was launching my firm, I was thinking about how to systematize and automate my own business processes. And I was part of a group of other founders through XY Planning Network. We would meet every week, we would share what we were working on. And when I showed them the things that I was building for myself and my firm, they were just like, this is awesome. Can we pay you to do this for us? So a new business was born. I did both side by side for several years. And at this point, it's been about almost 5 years, I guess. It's funny how the time flies that I've only been focusing on Sphinx. My mission at this point is to help the people who help people because I feel like I can have an exponentially greater impact than I can just doing the planning work on my own. And I think that in partnership with folks like Kate and the work that she and her firm do, we can make that mission a reality. The thing I love about what I do is just allowing advisors. We primarily focus on working with small and solo practices, helping them achieve that level of efficiency that enterprise level firms might have their own dedicated team, inside team to help them with helping smaller and solo firms achieve similar efficiencies to what you could achieve on an enterprise level, so that you can, again, continue to help people make better decisions with their money and have greater impact on their lives.
That's awesome. Well, I'm very grateful that you're here with us today. And so let's jump into it. I think this conversation is timely. I've been talking to a lot of advisors and clients over the last couple of weeks who have the operational foundational piece in place. You know, they've got some workflows, they've got some templates, the team's using the technology pretty consistently, but they hit kind of an inflection point where they got a taste of that success and they're like, how do we do this even better? How do we take our operating system to the next level? How do we reduce some of the manual work that's being done by my and I want this is kind of the agenda, the framework that we're going to follow today, but I want to talk about why do we automate? What are some of the prerequisites for effective automation? Because, and sorry to break the news to y'all, there is no silver bullet. We have to do some of the foundational work first in order for the automation that Ariel is going to talk about to be effective. What's possible with automation to kind of get you thinking about how you can apply what we're going to talk about today to your business, and then what this would look like from like a practical lens. And so we'll run through just a couple of slides here pretty quickly. And then I want to open it up for some Q&A so that you can put Ariel in the hot seat and ask questions specifically about your business and to really pick a true expert's mind. And so why automation? And so I can't imagine many of you are waking up this morning and wanting to know the nuances of how to automate things, but it's more around how do we create more capacity? How do we grow without sacrificing our client experience? How do we do what we're doing better and reduce the manual work being done or like the clunkiness that we feel in our system? And so I want to ask you a couple questions, Ariel. What are some of the big inefficiencies that you see affecting the advisory firms that you're working with? Can you dig into that a little bit for us?
Absolutely. I mean, there are issues abound, but I would say that probably most of the folks in this room are here not because you're not interested in automation, but maybe you're just not sure how to get started or how it can best impact your workflow. But to answer your question, Kate, like what are some of the biggest deficiencies that we see? I think a lot of it focuses on the administrative side of things. So repetitive data entry is the core of all of the things that I'm about to say. And that would be things like somebody wants to book a call with you and you don't have a scheduling software set up. So you have to then manually go to your calendar. You have to enter the details, or somebody on your team, maybe it's not you, but somebody on your team has to do that process. Or maybe you do have a scheduler and now somebody has booked a call, but you need to take the data that they entered on the booking form and store it somewhere so that you can access it and refer to it later. So now you have to go to your CRM and you have to type in all those details. And then maybe you want to collect some additional information from the person who has booked the call, whether that be prior to the call or later on in the life cycle, if they do decide to become a client. And rather than having them or you enter each piece of data one time, there are so many different re-entry points for that same information throughout the process that it takes time. So that's inefficiency number one. If it's your time, that's just time. But if it's somebody else's time, that's also an inefficiency around money and your firm's budget. And then there's also the potential for data entry errors. Every single time you're re-entering the same piece of information, there's a chance that you or whoever's entering that data might make a typo. It happens. We're all human. And so the fewer re-entry points we can have for all of that data, the better. And I would say if I had to pick one primary overarching theme, administrative / data entry would be the number one biggest inefficiency rather, I'm so sorry, that I see throughout the firms that we work with. And even if they've got some automation set up, it's not to say that everything has to be automated or should be automated, but that's most of the time the area where we can be most effective with adding automation. and letting the human take over the tasks that are more human touch related, things like building that warm relationship with clients and let the computers and the robots do the things that they're best suited to, which is copying data.
I love that. And the potential for human error is a big one, and that diminishes the client experience very quickly if you have to go back and get forms signed, or you have to own up to an error. It's not a good look. My question is though, is like, how do you tackle that? Is this something like where you apply a lot of automations at once? Are you doing it in bite-sized chunks? How do people start thinking about what they can automate or what they should automate, I should say?
Yeah. And we're going to talk about this in a little bit, but there are some prerequisites at a high level. I'm just going to run through the process and kind of give you a glimpse, and then we'll dig into the details a little. Oh, perfect. Awesome. You jumped to the slide. So I would say that before we even start automating anything, we need to know what we should automate. And before we know what we should automate, we need to know what are we trying to accomplish and what does our actual process even look like that we want to
Mhm.
automate. So it really just begins pretty far before we actually even touch an automation, and that is things like design decisions, which is deciding on your folder naming conventions. How are you going to name your households if they have the same last name versus if it's a joint household with different last names? How are we going to set up our tags and things along those lines that really don't at the surface seem like they're related to automation, but have an impact when we do actually start the process of automating. Then comes blueprints, and this is things like creating our workflows and processes and actually getting them documented on paper. I know that you and I have talked about this, Kate, where folks will come to us and say, like, hey, I'm drowning in tasks. Like, what can I do? How can I get automated? I need to take some of these things off of my plate and let the automations just do the heavy lifting. And my first question before we do anything else is, do you have your processes created?
Mhm.
And are they actually documented in a way that we and anyone on your team can refer to them? And then, if we've got all of that in place, are you actually using the processes that you have documented and not just making it up as you go along, changing things here and there, making exceptions every single time you're working
Right.
with a new client? So, those are the prerequisites that we need. Once we've gotten through the process building, then we want to start thinking about which platforms we're using. What is your CRM? What is your scheduling software? What data gathering tool are we using? And so on. And then at that point, we've finally arrived at the place where we can take all of that together. We can review it, we can scope out where are those opportunities, and then we can start to rank which of these things are going to be most effective and most impactful to myself and my team, keeping our budget, again, both time budget and financial budget in mind. So typically, we really don't try to do everything at once. We do try to break up this entire process into stages. Our work comes in at that final stage, which is the scoping of the automation opportunities and the implementation. But a lot of those prerequisites fall more into Kate's realm and her team's realm. And so this is why we love to collaborate with other experts who do the things that we're not as great at doing and know that they're done right. That way, when we finally arrive at the place where we're ready to automate, we can do it most effectively and most efficiently.
Well said. And I think about automations because I've seen it done well and I've seen it done not so well. Almost as like adding in another team member into the mix. And we all know what it feels like to join an organization that has no systems, has no processes, nothing's been documented, and you're kind of just like scrambling to figure out what to do every day, or you're relying on somebody on your team to ask what you should be doing next. And I feel like the same thing is true when you introduce something like an automation tool. It just automates whatever is already there. And if what is there is inconsistent or disorganized or not trustworthy, it's a snowball effect of disorganization, and it can get really unwieldy and out of hand very quickly. And I appreciate you laying out these prerequisites the way you did. I can see why you're firm on these. I'm curious if you your experience and why you put these guardrails in place. Have you had a similar experience in like automating a disorganized business and what those effects might be?
Oh, have I? I'm just joking. I mean, I've been doing this work for, it's going to be 9 years in October. I thought about it the other day and I was like, has it really been that long?
Mhm.
And so, of course, in the beginning, like all of you, when you launched your firm, you were figuring out what are your processes. We had to figure out the same thing and trial and error. In the beginning, when I first started 9 years ago, my first couple of clients were like, this is awesome. Let's just do everything as much as we can all at once. And it's exciting. It seems like it's going to be most effective to do it that way. But what actually ends up happening, we find, is that if we try to do too many things at once, it's that analysis paralysis kind of situation
Yeah.
where even if we've got the prerequisites all in place, we have our design decisions, we've got our workflows blueprinted out and documented in a way everybody can see them. We've chosen our tech platforms, like cool, even if we've got those foundational things in place, if we try to take all of that and just automate as much as we possibly can, as fast as we possibly can, what ends up happening is we don't have time to A, fully test it and make sure it's
Mm.
working, because let's face it, there are always bugs that we want to work through. But B, and I think more importantly, you forget what you've actually automated. And so you find yourself going and trying to do the manual work that you no longer need to do just because your brain is in that like habitual go mode. You're just on autopilot to a certain degree. So
Yeah.
we have done that in the past, but it's been a years long endeavor, multiple years long endeavor of refining that process to become most effective and most efficient, again, making sure that you're getting the value and the impact of the things that we're actually building out. And or if you're building it out for yourself, the same exact rules and tenets apply. Like even if you're doing it yourself, which we do help folks that are DIYers or more DIY mindset, if you want to work jointly together, we offer coaching. But even if you're the one driving the process, I would recommend keeping those same principles in mind of not trying to do too much at once, because contrary to what it might seem, that actually creates friction instead of takes it away.
Yeah, I made that mistake personally in my own business, trying to automate too much at once. And what ended up happening is I felt like I was babysitting automations all day. And I didn't trust them. They weren't trustworthy. And if they're not trustworthy, nobody is going to buy into what we're building. And it just erodes the trust that we need to have in our operating system. So I'm grateful that you share these. But like I said at the beginning of the conversation, there is no silver bullet. You do have to do the foundational work first. But I do, Ariel, I would love for you to share with everybody to kind of like get them thinking about how they can apply this idea of automation to their own business. Like, what is possible? Like, how big should they be dreaming?
There are so many things that are possible. And again, we could dream as big as we want, but I think it is important to also take it in stages. I think the first stage is like, what is the low-hanging fruit?
Mm-hmm.
And we've actually developed what we call quick start projects, which are about 7 different, somewhat tech system independent automations or efficiencies, let's call it, because some of them are not automations in the typical sense, but they're more like forms, data gathering processes for folks. And starting with those. And what ends up inevitably happening is once you start the automation process, or even let's just take it a step back, maybe you haven't done some of those prerequisite and foundational things that we talked about in the previous slide. Once you start that process of revisiting your workflows, revisiting your processes, making sure you're going through them with a fine-tooth comb, you naturally just start to uncover
Mm-hmm.
what are those opportunities? Where are the places in my process where I'm doing the same thing over and over and over again? What are the tasks that my team is complaining about? Maybe they can't find what they need when they need it, or maybe they're feeling frustrated, like something is just not quite clicking. I think as we go through those prerequisite exercises, but even also as we actually start building out automations, you start to see, oh, well, if I can do X, what if I could just add this next level onto it and do Y? The sky's the limit, but we want to get there in stages. We want to build the plane before we try to fly it and crash, I guess is a
And
good analogy.
And so, can you talk a little bit about once they have the foundation in place and they're feeling really good about their CRM and some of the other accompanying technology? Can you give examples of your quick starts and like where somebody could kind of just take their first stab at it?
Sure. So one of the ones that we've been doing a ton of lately is syncing contact records or household records to events on the CRM calendar. If any of you are using Redtail or Wealthbox, those are the two versions of this particular one that we have in place. You know that while you can sync the events directly to the CRM calendar, using the Outlook or the Google Calendar direct sync. What doesn't happen when you do that is it doesn't find or create a contact record or a household record related to the meeting invitees. It doesn't link that contact or household record to the event, and it doesn't categorize the event based on what type of meeting it is that you're holding. So that's one that we're doing a ton of lately. That's kind of been like the top of the list, most popular one.
Mhm.
Some of the other ones are around, this is honestly one of my favorites. This is probably one of the very first automations that we ever set up for anybody back in the day, is what we call our documentation needs list generator. And if any of you have been through the mortgage process in the last decade or so, you'll kind of understand why this was one of the first things I did coming from the mortgage world. Basically, it's a questionnaire that you or the client will fill out. You'll answer about 15 questions about their particular situation, and based on their situation, it will generate a custom list of the documents they need to provide to you so that you can get that in front of them without, again, giving them that full list of here's all the things you might need. Maybe half of them or more don't apply to your situation. Rather, hey, based on your particular situation, here are the things that you'll actually need to provide. So those are like the two most popular ones that we've been working on, especially lately. I think they're really effective, and as I mentioned, they're very tech agnostic to a certain degree.
That's great.
All that the first one requires is that you've chosen both your CRM and your calendaring platform and your scheduling platform. And those are usually systems that are very unlikely to change as a firm grows and evolves. Not to say that they never do, but those are usually like core platforms that folks are using and deciding upon. And the second one simply requires that you've chosen a data gathering platform, whether that be Jotform, which is the case of the templated version, or we also do work with Precise FP, Typeform, and so on. So once you've chosen that system, then the rest is just kind of standardized, and we can always tweak it as time goes on. It doesn't mean that we can't grow it or evolve it or change it, but getting the foundation in place and then living with it for some time and understanding where additional efficiencies are needed, I think is really helpful to making sure that we don't end up having to do the whole thing and then backtrack and undo and redo and undo and redo. We just start with what is the minimum viable product,
Sure.
and then if we need more, we can always scale it up as time passes.
Yeah, that was one of the questions is it custom or is it super templated? Do you have some wiggle room to customize it for the way like you speak and the way you interact with your clients? And it sounds like that's a yes.
Absolutely. And the quick start projects themselves are meant to be, again, just quick start, something to
Yeah.
get you over the hump, like a template to get you started, get the ball rolling. But the majority of the work that we do is customized to our clients' needs, whether we are starting with that templated foundation and then tweaking it from there, or coming together and evaluating, hey, we do need something completely custom from scratch. That's 85 to 90% of the work that we actually do is that custom build out of automation
Mhm.
for folks.
One of the automations you and I were talking about that I really like is like the morning daily download that you can create. Can you talk a little bit about that? Something from a like a business owner standpoint. I really appreciate being teed up in the morning, letting me know what's ahead of me for the day. I'm curious how you have implemented that for some of your clients.
That's a great lead in. That is one of the other quick start projects that we have. It's the daily digest. If you are using Wealthbox, a lot of our Wealthbox users use the built-in digest
Yeah.
feature, but if you're on Redtail, they don't have that similar feature built out. So this is one that we've created for specifically the Redtail users. What the automation does is it looks at your calendar and your tasks list every single day at usually around 11 p.m. the day before, but we could change that time to be whatever day time of the day is best for what you're looking for. And it says, hey, coming up tomorrow, tomorrow the whole entire day, what are the events that are on my calendar? What are the tasks that need to be completed? What are the workflows that are currently in process? And it basically just creates a digest of all of those things. Depending how you want it to organize, we can organize it chronologically. For some folks, we organize it by type. So we'll have all the events at the top, and then we'll have all the tasks, and then we'll have all the workflows. And we basically just aggregate all of that information in the format that you'd like, and it sends an email to you and or to your team in the morning, let's just say 6 a.m., 7 a.m. again, that can be customized and saying, hey, like here's what's coming up for your day. So you start the morning prepared, knowing what's to come instead of trying to scramble and, oh, I forgot I had a meeting in 10 minutes and now I have to figure it out and jump on. What was I going to talk about? You start that day a little bit more prepared and kind of knowing what's to come. And sometimes we scale it back. Daily is too much, so we just want to see like a weekly glance at what's coming up ahead. So we can customize it to a certain degree, but the overall efficiency is around just knowing what's coming up on your plate that you need to tackle in the days or weeks ahead.
Yeah, I love that. Another question is around, WealthBox has their dashboard that you can customize and create. Redtail doesn't quite have something like that. And one of the gripes that I get from Redtail users is like, I want visibility in like what my team is doing. Where are we at on these projects? And right now, you can do that out of Redtail, but I just want to see it at like a 30,000-foot overview on some sort of dashboard. I'm curious if you guys prepare things like that so that the C-level or the leaders of the organization can see at a glance and measure productivity and bandwidth and things like that.
We do. That definitely starts to get more into the realm of completely custom projects because
Mhm.
everybody's metrics, their KPIs are different for what they want to see.
Yeah.
But especially when we get into the multi-member firms, we're talking like 10 plus team members, all the way up to as many team members as you have. We do a lot of Excel-based or Google Sheets-based dashboards that are customized. They're tied into the metrics that live inside of the CRM, but they also can tie in metrics that live in outside platforms and essentially create that one-stop shop database. We do have a couple of clients that are using other databasing platforms like Airtable. So, I mean, it doesn't have to be just Excel or Sheets. Again, tech agnostic, not tech dependent, but just the concept of creating that aggregated dashboard in some sort of databasing system that's not only the CRM, but maybe ties in other things. That is absolutely something that we do work with folks to do and can help with.
Yeah, it's just a little shortcoming in the system. I am curious. So I automated workflows on here. Obviously, that's a huge one. Huge thing that I love about workflows is the ability to trigger workflows automatically. Some of the CRMs are better at this than others. Redtail has some native automation. So like if this, then that, it can trigger a workflow or whatever it might be. I'm curious how you introduce automation into a system that has native automation, and then do you basically just like clone and copy that for Wealthbox users so there is some level of automation in the system that doesn't have it natively?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what the system is. So you
Sure.
mentioned Redtail, and in the beginning of this whole journey, I was like, yes, Redtail's awesome because it has automations built in. But if you've ever used the automations in Redtail, you immediately find that, again, it's a good starting point. It's better than having no automations, but there are some limitations to how the automations work in Redtail. My view is always, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And what I mean by that is we start as simple as we can. If there's a direct sync between two platforms, we'll try our best to use that before we start to add in third-party connection platforms like Zapier, like Make. If there are automations built into a given system, we'll try to use the internal automations before we start to add in third-party automation systems like Zapier, like Make, like Google
Appreciate
Apps.
that.
But if we hit a roadblock, if we hit a limit with what the native connections or the native automations can do, that's where we start to introduce those third-party platforms. And we, again, start as simple as we can, which is let's use the out-of-the-box connectors that exist within these platforms. And if we run into a roadblock there, then we start to explore further complexities like creating a custom Zapier integration, for example, which we do have for a couple of different platforms, including Wellbox and Redtail, that just like add on to the out-of-the-box Zapier integration efficiencies, or creating a custom coded API call to pull data in or push data out. We really, again, but starting at the beginning part first, like start as simple as possible. Like don't overcomplicate it if we don't need to. But if we hit a roadblock and then we need to go to that next level, we can quickly and easily, like we've had so much experience that we can already tell, like right off the bat, hey, this is something that the system can or can't do by default. But we do try as much as possible to work within the parameters that we have accessible before we move on to that next level of like adding complexity and how it's working. And part of the reason for that is because we really do want our clients to be able, as much as they can and are willing to self-manage.
Yeah,
We
I
don't
love that.
really want folks to feel like they're obligated or tied to have this ongoing relationship with us if they don't want it. It's an option. We are available. We do offer ongoing maintenance for folks, but we want people to be empowered to do as much as they feel comfortable and interested in doing. That's kind of why I take that approach. That's at the forefront of my mind when I'm thinking about how to approach it is that ability to empower people to do what they can and want to do on their own.
Yeah, and I think you and I align a lot on that, keeping it as simple as possible. And I appreciate the way you articulated that because that's where I got myself in trouble. And then I'm babysitting automations, and then I get disenchanted with all these automation tools, and it introduces a layer of complexity that you really have to measure, is the juice worth the squeeze? All right, so moving on here, guys, I want to talk about how to implement this into your own business. And so if you're thinking, all of this sounds really great conceptually, but where do I start? It's exactly the question you should be asking. And the next step, like Ariel said in the beginning, is understanding where the biggest opportunities exist inside your business. And so, as part of this conversation today, and a follow-up email, we'll send everybody an operational self-assessment that will allow you to evaluate how ready your firm is to support these types of automations. It will also give you a clearer picture of where things sit within your CRM, your processes, are your workflows serving you well, and is there opportunity for improvement? And we'll also include a list of some automation ideas that can help really take your client experience to the next level, improve some of your overall team efficiency, and build upon the foundation that you have in place. And so, if you are a DIY kind of person, I have no doubt that you'll walk away with plenty of ideas that you can begin implementing on your own. Our goal is to give you some practical tools to help make running your business more enjoyable and less burdensome. And so we will provide you with the details that you need for that option. If you would prefer to have a guide on this journey, you should definitely talk to our team. We would love to learn more about you and your business and understand your goals. And then, determine if we're a good fit to be able to help, where we would, do a super deep dive into your business, perform a comprehensive assessment for your firm, benchmark your business against some KPIs, and create a customized roadmap for your next stage of growth. And that roadmap will include, our list of recommendations and systems and processes and workflows and technology, and then collaborating with Ariel on automation opportunities designed specifically for your business. Because at the end of the day, the truth is every investment advisory firm runs a little bit differently. So we can give you some ideas here, but if you'd like, specific recommendations tailored to your firm, let's have a conversation. So all that being said, I do want to open it up for some Q&A here. We have the opportunity to put Ariel on the hot seat and pick her brain around all things automations. So I will monitor the chat here if anybody has any questions. I'm curious how people have been thinking about automation. I'm curious how you are or are not using automation. So drop your questions here. I will monitor both the chat and the Q&A. I see one question here going back to the Daily Digest, Ariel. They are asking, so can you have Redtail create that Daily Digest daily? You can elaborate on that a little bit.
Sure. So I think the question is asking if it's just a setting that you're missing, Kyle, around like, oh, Redtail does have the ability to internally create this daily digest, and you're not missing anything. So I apologize if the way that I explained that wasn't clear. Redtail, unlike Wealthbox, doesn't have that built-in digest feature. So what that means is instead we use Zapier in this particular case to aggregate all of the tasks, the events, the workflows that are currently open, and then use Zapier to send that email to yourself or to the team or to both regarding what that daily digest is. So if I've misunderstood your question, please feel free to clarify. I'm happy to go into further detail. But I think what you're asking is it done in Redtail directly? And the answer to that is no. We basically take the data from Redtail, create the digest, and send it out using Zapier.
That's great. Um, Somebody else is asking what types of automations do you use? They're really only using one currently. I don't know if you want to speak to that, Ariel. I'm not a financial advisor. I run in a consulting practice and we leverage automation for things like she talked about launching workflows, meeting prep, email follow-ups, capturing leads, updating contacts in the CRM. Very similar things to what Ariel was mentioning there, but curious if you have other ideas to throw out there.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm curious to know what is the one automation that you're currently using, Jessica. If you want to drop
Absolutely.
that in the chat, I'd love to know. But I can tell you a little bit about the things that we're doing for ourselves and what we do for other advisors. I mean, again, I don't do advising anymore. I shut down my RIA going on 5 years now, so I only do the consulting at this point. But setting up these automations for my RIA at the time was what prompted this. And we're going to send you some more examples when we're done. But just to kind of like spitball here, thinking about the lead part of the process, some of the things we do is around getting those scheduling systems set up. Somebody
Mhm.
books a meeting with you, depending on what type of meeting it is, launching the appropriate tasks or workflows in the CRM system, finding or creating, if not found, a contact record and maybe a household record, linking the two together, categorizing that meeting and linking it to that found or created household or contact record. And then maybe some things like sending out a nurture campaign. You've had an initial conversation with somebody who's a prospective client, but they haven't yet signed on, making sure we're tracking where they are in that client life cycle and then appropriately sending them more information to allow them and facilitate them taking that next step. Um,
Great.
then we come to like the onboarding part of the process, things like building out those data gathering forms and making sure that any information we've collected gets aggregated to the CRM. Maybe we're launching additional different workflows at that point in the process, generating contract envelopes and DocuSign and sending them for signature using the appropriate template for the type of engagement that they're having. I mean, I could go on and on and on. And again, we will send you some of these ideas documented as a resource after the session. But just to kind of spark some ideas and get the ball rolling, those are some of the things that we set up for our clients. And some of them we have set up for ourselves too, because we're a service-based business. And
Mhm.
even though we focus on serving advisors and financial planners, and 98% of our clients are in that space, just because it's let's say my ministry. Some of these things do apply to other service-based businesses. If you're meeting with clients, if you're engaging with clients, you're providing a service and you're interacting, some of these things can be repeatable for other industries too. So I hope that answers your question. Please feel free to clarify if I can go into more detail, and I'd love to know more.
Yeah, she's got a good automation set up. When an email is added or changed, we can link them to our newsletter. That's a perfect example.
Yeah,
Um,
awesome.
Somebody else is asking about compliance approval to use Zapier. What's been your experience with that?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. I would say it's always a good idea to involve your compliance platform or your compliance consultant. If you're adding any kind of tech to your systems, no, most of our clients don't have any problems, even if they're part of these big umbrella firms like the LPL or the Cambridges. At this point, in the technological landscape, most of them have figured out ways to allow approval to use systems like Zapier. But let's just say that you are in the situation where you're not able to do that. Then we kind of, again, we have fewer opportunities, but we can always walk it back to using the automations that exist within the tools that you are already using. And I actually think that this bears saying, adding efficiency through the way that you're actually doing your daily work. And that does fall
Mhm.
more into Kate and her team's realm, but I think it bears repeating, which is that if your workflows and your processes are efficient as possible, that's going to be more impactful, in my opinion, than anything that automation can necessarily provide you. Automation will take it to the next level. But if you don't have those good foundations set up, you're still missing out opportunities that you would otherwise have. So we could definitely chat offline if you have specific questions or if your compliance is like, hey, we don't love this. But I would say in our experience, most compliance departments and or compliance consultants, third party or internal, are typically at the point where Zapier obviously is secure. They have gone through rigorous kind of security testing, SOC 2, SOC 3. They've got all of their protocols listed out on their website, and we can also do things where we limit what's connected to Zapier if there's concerns around certain information being accessible. So I know I've waxed poetic about that. I'll pause and see if there's any other questions or clarification, but yeah.
I think that's great. And I think, this we maybe should have even prefaced this conversation at the beginning that like all of this all of what we're talking about is assuming that you have your ducks in a row and that you have clean data and systems and things in place, all those prerequisites she was talking about. And so that's why I think it's important to do an assessment of where you're at, identify if there's any gaps, to ensure the stuff is as effective as possible. Otherwise you create more of a mess. And so we got a little bit more time here, guys. If anybody has additional questions, I think this is really helpful. Gets my wheels spinning. I think about it kind of similarly to the conversation we have with advisors about like what is a workflow. Start paying attention to the things that you're doing multiple times. Start paying attention to the things that are maybe like energy sucking instead of energy giving. Those are things to start, making mental note or just honestly documenting out like here are some of the things that are really painful to me in my day, and then talking to our team about is there a potential to leverage Ariel's knowledge and her team's skill set to be able to automate those things so that you're spending less of the time doing the stuff you don't like to do and more of the time doing the stuff that you do like to do. And a lot of it is administrative stuff, which is what I find to be the most burdensome.
Amen.
No other questions? I'd love it if people can drop in here how you're using Make or Zapier or some automation tools, or I mean, even if you're a Redtail user, are you using the Redtail automations? So many people that we talk to just don't, and they get in the habit of adding everything manually. And I feel like that's you just kind of scratch the surface of what's possible. I'd love to understand where people are at in their automations journey. Yeah, it's so interesting. Zero automations. We use Redtail, and I guess that's why I was confused because it's so limited in their system. It is, and Redtail. I mean, I think Redtail's done a good job taking a stab at automating some of, the common tasks and use cases, but it is very limited. And I think people get, at least I feel a little uncomfortable sometimes having these conversations with advisors, and they're like, "That's it." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's it," But that's not what the CRM ultimately was designed around, right?
Yeah. I mean, for better or for worse, this is why I have this beautiful opportunity to do this work. I
Yeah.
mean, I wish it weren't so. I wish it weren't needed because everything was built into the system directly and we didn't need to involve third-party tools or kind of make those customizations. But it is what it is, and for the time being, at least for the foreseeable future. And so we're here to help again, whether that's if you are like more of a DIYer, but you just need that spark of what can I do, or if you're just like, hey, I want to get started on my own, but I need a little hand holding to take it over the finish line. Or if you're at the very far end of the spectrum that you're just like, oh, this is not my cup of tea. I know I need
Mhm.
automation, but I have no interest or technical desire to do any of this stuff. Just do it for me. We're here to help. So avail yourself. Please feel free to reach out to me directly or to Kate. I would say to get started, reach out to Kate and then she can direct you over to us when it's appropriate.
Love it. What are some of like the outcomes or transformations that you're most proud of or that you've seen?
I think that it's an interesting question. I mean, we've done our best to get folks to tell us how much time they're saving through the work that we've set up. And I would say on average, it's between 5 to 10 hours a week, even with just like a limited set of automations that we're setting up for people. But what I'm most proud of, I think, is the intangible benefits, which is that freeing up the time that is currently being spent on administrative and rote work is now being redirected to building deeper client relationships, to going out and prospecting more and selling more and bringing more people into the book of business. So I mean, there's definitely that tangible like time savings aspect of it, but for me, the intangible benefit is really what I'm most proud of because it goes back to my mission, which is to help the people who help people.
Mhm.
And probably most of the people that are on this automation webinar got into advising and to financial planning because they wanted to impact people's lives, not because they wanted to do data entry. So
Yeah.
that's my joy.
It's so interesting that you say that because I'm asked a lot when I talk to advisors, like return on investment, return on investment. And yeah, we can quantify an increase in revenue per advisor, employee, profitability, things like that. But the wins that make me most happiest are those intangibles. It's like, well, now I have time to coach my kids' sports team. I took a vacation without a laptop. We haven't had a NIGO for 6 months. And it's that like that reduction in opportunity for human error. And by systematizing and automating this stuff, you can rest assured that it's going to get done not by you. It's going to be done well, and you're no longer the bottleneck or the single point of failure. And that has been so rewarding to the business owners that we work with. And so it's just funny to like think I'm starting a business to help people make more money or increase profitability or things like that. But it's actually just it's about living a better life and enjoying what you do because you're not burdened by all the crud that you don't want to be doing. There's a couple of other comments here about implementing things like Zox. That's a huge time saver. Um, Another one here, one automation for scheduling through G reminders and Redtail. We're not built-in automations we're not using as we have multiple advisors that recently moved from Silo to Ensemble. Curious if you have thoughts on any of that, Ariel.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that adds another level of complexity, which is
Totally.
again where both Kate and my work comes into play, especially in conjunction. When you're solo, okay, it's just you. You're only responsible for your own action items, you're only responsible for your own outcomes. But when you start to grow your team, especially when you get to the size where you're saying, are we going to silo into smaller groups or smaller teams, or are we going to become more of an ensemble style practice? Maybe we're doing like diamond teams where there's a couple of different people working on the same client project. It definitely does add that layer of complexity to both the automations and to just the processes themselves. So it does start to Keisha's point to limit the ability to use those built-in tools. We start to really need to make some custom automation setups because we need to adjust for all of those different factors that the system's built-in automations, Redtail in this example, can't really handle as well. Like if this and if this and if this other thing, then do this thing. Redtail's okay at doing like if this thing is true, then do that thing. But when we start to layer on all of those rules, that's where we start to run into limitations.
Yeah, it's a lot more linear. And I think one of the things that I've found a lot of value in leveraging automations for that we haven't really talked about today, that people ask me all the time is like, how do you ensure adoption of all of these systems? And you need to make it as easy as possible to use. And I have found that advisors are like, oh, I'm never going to use a workflow. It's like, well, if you just automate it, if you create a trigger that automatically launches the workflow, there's no argument around not using workflows anymore. And so I've just found that by automating the tasks, it teams have a greater adoption rate of whatever systems we're trying to build. So keeping that in mind too, if you're struggling getting people to buy into whatever, you're designing and building.
And I think also too, if the workflows themselves are designed well, if we've
Yeah.
taken out the things that people aren't actually using and we've really focused on making sure that they're well documented, that the resources needed to complete the step of the workflow are all at hand. And again, that really falls more into your realm and your team's realm. But I think that's why it is, again, I know I'm reiterating the same thing over and over again, but that is why it really is so important to do that prerequisite work and why that work is so impactful, because that's where the first really big level of efficiency comes in. And then automation, I always like to say automation is the icing on the cake. It's not the cake itself. So, like, it's great. And I love automation. Obviously, it's what I do all day long. But at the same time, automation is never going to replace the actual most important foundational things that you're doing, which is making sure your processes are created, documented, and documented the right way.
I can appreciate that. Well, Ariel, you are a true wealth of knowledge. I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to collaborate with you and watch the good work that you do. We've got a couple more minutes, guys, if anybody else has any other questions. Otherwise, we will send you the self-assessment so you can get a gauge on where you're at. And then whenever it makes sense to deploy some of the recommendations that we're going to send you to help automate your business and create some more capacity for everybody. So you run a more enjoyable business. Any parting words, Ariel?
Yeah, I actually do see a comment from Keisha that I want to address. Thank you so much for that really good insight. She said workflows would work so much better if the timelines were true for every client or
Mm,
process, but they're subjective to outside factors. And I do think that that absolutely rings true. I think that it's more difficult when you're not focused on a certain niche or a certain type of client, where you're working with clients in different stages of life or different stages of focus in terms of what planning you're doing together with them. I think part of what could help, and again, Kate's really probably the better person to ask about this, but I'm just going to give you my insight. And Kate, if you have something to add, please feel free to jump in.
sure.
I think what works in that type of scenario is breaking down these longer, bigger workflows into smaller, bite-sized chunks where we can then incorporate the more conditional logic of, well, if this person is in this particular phase or working on this particular topic, launch this bite-sized workflow instead of launching this really long, complicated workflow with lots of branching paths that may or may not actually be true or needed for this particular scenario. We can also start to use, again, now going back to the built-in idea, we can start to use those outcomes in the workflow
Yep.
modules, where if this particular outcome is selected, now we're showing the correct next step based on that selection. And also then incorporating those third-party conditions, which is, okay, we've got a tag on their contact. I'm just making this up, so bear with me. But and if you want to clarify, Keisha, please feel free. But like an example that comes to mind, we have clients that have tags for the type of relationship or the segment that that person's in. Like we've got our A clients, our double A clients, our triple A clients.
Mm-hmm.
So before we actually launch the workflow, we first look at the contact record and we say, okay, what are the tags on this person's record so that we then launch the correct version of this similar but not exactly the same workflow. And I think combining those different options makes that problem less of a problem. I mean, but feel free to jump in if you have something else to add on that from your perspective, Kate.
No, I think that's a great explanation. And we come across that a lot. And we try to keep the list of workflows as short as possible so we don't have 1,000 workflows for the same thing. But sometimes if it is so nuanced, you just have you have to weigh the positives and negatives around having multiple workflows for something similar, or like she's talking about, breaking it down into smaller bite-sized processes. If it starts to feel convoluted or you're constantly having to like reassign the workflow or change the target date, chances are you need to have another workflow for a similar process. So it depends case by case, to be honest. This is a good question. Thank you guys all for being here. This has been really fun. We will be doing another one of these. Ariel doesn't know this yet, but we're going to be hitting her up to do something like this again next month. An open forum, ask me anything. I think this is a very hot topic right now, and people are looking to, take the systems that they've been using for the last numerous years and take it to the next level. So, Ariel, thank you
Likewise,
so
thank
much for
you.
being here. This was super fun. I
Thank you so much
appreciate
for
you
having
letting
me,
us,
Kate.
yeah, pick your brain. This was fun. So thank you guys all for attending, and we'll send you follow-ups a little later on this week. Please reach out if anybody has any questions. We'll see you at the next one.
You guys.
Bye, guys.